let's move on. As I mentioned before, there have been so many just utterly insane and gaslighting and wild comments coming out of Israel that we felt the need to devote an entire segment to them, to go through some of the highlights. This will not be a comprehensive survey of the list of wild comments that have been made, but just to give you a sense of the discourse that is coming from not just like random Israelis, but from political leaders with power, from journalists and analysts who are on TV all the time. I want to start with this one because this one was in many ways like the wildest, although it's a pretty good competition here. So this is the deputy mayor of Jerusalem. She's responding to the reports that we covered here that the IDF had targeted and killed 2 Christian women at a Catholic church in Gaza. And so she's being asked about this. Just take a listen to what her response is. Take a listen.
Why is it necessary, it is reported, to start shooting, having snipers outside a church?
I saw the reports this morning. The church, there are no churches in Gaza, so I'm not quite sure where the report is talking about.
There's a Catholic church in there, isn't there? That is.
Yeah, unfortunately, there are no Christians because they were driven out by.
Well, respectfully, there are Christians because I spoke to an MP yesterday who has family members in the church who are Christians.
Well, I don't know what happened. I don't know who was attacked. I didn't see the report.
Amazing. There are no churches in Gaza. Yes, she just is denying reality to try to avoid the implications of what the IDF did here, which is what the Pope described as terrorism. There are no churches in Gaza. Yeah, actually there are. Well, there are no Christians in Gaza. Well, actually there are. Oh, well, the report that I previously claimed that I had seen, I actually didn't see that report, so I have no idea.
Yeah.
Amazing.
Look, I mean, one of the reasons I think I also want to highlight this too is because I am so deeply annoyed by this idea that, Israel and Netanyahu, or even Israel and the far right are one and the same, and that we are not allowed to criticize or to look at this country, which has much more robust debate about itself than we are allowed to have over here. And people rightfully, I think, can demonstrate and understand that, criticizing a political party or a particular strategy does not mean that you are against the entire country's right to exist or any of that. And I think a lot of people also want to deny about a pretty decent segment of Israeli politics which agrees with some of these statements, which are, I think, antithetical to our ends and their ends. But their ends are their business. They can decide. At the very least, though, we need to have a full visibility into what they want and what they are saying. And I think it's pretty unfortunate because if we paid better attention, especially too in the age of translation, of Google Translate and all that, it's not difficult to suss out. This is a Western country. They have sets just like this in Tel Aviv. They're sitting on them and talking about it in Hebrew. You can go and look if you want. And if that's too hard for you, you can read the English Israeli press, which often translates that all for you. And yet we try to get a lot of people, especially who watch cable, so much of it is filtered down through so many levels. You just have a totally hijacked and different view of what it all looks like. You think I honestly think you would think that everybody is eminently reasonable in Israel, and that everyone in Palestine is like or everyone in Hamas in Gaza is like some sort of Hamas flag-waving terrorist and all that. It just couldn't be more further from it. There's all the nuance in it is completely lost.
The other thing is, I want to play you the next one, but if you heard any Palestinian or Palestinian supporter saying some of these things, like everyone in this country would know about it. Every politician would be getting asked about it. It would be played on a loop. And yet these things are said in the open commonly in Israel, and our politicians just pretend like they don't hear it, they don't see it, and that it's some just purely targeted ethical mission and war that's being engaged in the Gaza Strip. It's just, if you listen to their own comments and then look at what they're doing on the ground, it becomes undeniable what is happening in front of your eyes. So here's our next example. This is an Israeli journalist, Shimon Ricklin. He says, "I am for the war crimes. I don't care if I am criticized, and I honestly don't care." He goes on, "I am unable to sleep if I don't see houses being destroyed in Gaza. What can I say? More houses, more buildings. I want to see more of them destroyed. I want there to be nothing for them to return to. In the Torah, it says they must return to the salt of the earth and they must complain. This is why we cannot reach a solution. And that is what war crimes mean to me." So I'm for the war crimes. I appreciate the honesty, actually. And this is something we've talked about, something Daryl Cooper talks about. The far right in Israel has always been much more upfront about the project they're engaged in, about what their goals are, about what they actually want. And I think this man is being very honest about his perspective here. By the way, someone pointed out, and I confirmed, he's wearing a pin there in that segment. It's a Stern Gang pin. So to give people a little bit of the sense of the history here, in the early days of the sort of like colonial period of the founding of the state of Israel, there were a number of militias. The large ones were Haganah, which was the more like labor-affiliated one, the Irgun, which then becomes Likud. And the Irgun was already like, they committed all kinds of terrorist acts. They were already very far right. The Stern Gang was the ones that were to the right of them. They called themselves terrorists. They referred to themselves as terrorists. They actually sought to come to some sort of an allyship with Nazi Germany because they thought the Nazis were less of a threat to Jews than Britain. So they sought multiple times to come to some sort of a deal and accommodation with Hitler and the Nazis. They advocated for mass expulsion of all Arabs from Palestine and from Jordan. Their publications openly talked about a Jewish master race, contrasting the Jews with Arabs who were seen as a nation of slaves. So that's the pin that he's wearing as he says that he's for the war crimes.
Yeah, I mean, look, it's kind of like Ukraine, where the honesty around these countries and their, the honesty around their countries and their political constituencies and who matters and who has power with the neo-Nazis. I mean, a lot of people here just simply don't want to acknowledge it. And that's the issue, is that you can separate this easily from the state, from its people, and from what is actually has support. But you're right in this, that if Palestinians or Arabs and all those were, I mean, look, also, you can go find those videos too if you want about Arabs and Hamas leaders and all those saying that about Jews. But you're right in that there is a lot of disparate coverage in the way that it ends up showing up in our discourse, especially amongst our elected officials.
Oh, for
That's
sure.
Very true.
So let's go next to, we met this woman before. Her name is Daniela Weiss. She is the head of a Zionist settler movement. And she was interviewed by Isaac Chotiner. Previously, she's the one that said effectively like, yeah, we're building the settlements because the US and others want there to be a Palestinian state. We don't want there to be a Palestinian state. And then she said, it is a very simple thing to understand. Again, honest, appreciate that. Let's go ahead and put her up on the screen about what she wants to happen in Gaza. So she says Gaza must be erased so that the settlers can see the sea. She goes on, the situation needs to end. What we did in northern Gaza, we must do it south of Gaza, evacuating Gaza of Arabs and building Jewish settlements in all of Gaza. So making it pretty clear here. She says the settlers, they want to see the sea. And in order to see the sea, all homes in Gaza must be destroyed. There are no homes or Arabs left in Gaza. This, she says, is a logical and romantic demand. That is her perspective, is that Gaza should be, the parking lot image of Gaza. And again, just laying it out here, what she has an idea of what she wants the day after conversation to be like. And you wonder why Netanyahu is so reluctant to come forward with what his plan is. It's because people like her are an important part of his electoral coalition and of his governing coalition.
Incredibly important, as Glenn points out. Israelis, when speaking in Hebrew, are often more candid and truthful about the real goals in Gaza than their American supporters in both parties are. And this is the settler issue is one that has been long condemned by bipartisan administrations here in Washington. It's against our official posture from the State Department. It's so much so that President Biden even imposed sanctions or entry delay on people who espouse this or have been involved in violence from entering the United States. But the political circumstances right now of the time are basically like, are you with them or are you not with them? And I just don't know why it's so difficult to even parse through this and just be like, well, I definitely think it's horrible what happened on October 7th. I definitely think Hamas needs to go. I think your military strategy is bad. I think some elements of your society are totally out of control, and you should probably, do something about that at the very least, just for international cooperation perspective. I also think this is why Netanyahu's position is just so terrible, both for Israel and really for the long-term prospects of the nation, is because by fusing himself with the state, he has made it here in this country too, such that criticism of him is being called anti-Semitic. Well, Israel, a lot of people are just going to be like, okay, I'll take that trade because I disagree entirely. That erodes long-term support. And then same here, where if he's so politically held by these people in his political constituency, then how exactly are we supposed to ever see this come to an end?
Yeah.
That's my problem.
And Daniela's not alone. Put the tear sheet that we have at the end, put this up in the screen. She's not alone in wanting to, destroy all of Gaza and destroy all of the homes. This was an Israeli politician on the radio. He is David Auli, the head of the town of Metula in northern Israel. He called on Israel to forcibly eject Palestinians in Gaza to Lebanon, flatten the besieged enclave, and turn it into a museum, just like in Auschwitz, the, of course, concentration camp in Poland. Quote, after October 7th, instead of urging people to go south, we should direct them to the beaches. The Navy can transport them to the shores of Lebanon where there are already sufficient refugee camps. Then a security strip should be established from the sea to the Gaza border fence, completely empty as a reminder of what was once there. It should resemble the Auschwitz concentration camp, of course. 1.1 million people, 1 million of which were Jews, were killed by Nazi Germany in that concentration camp. And that's what he is saying he wants to see in Gaza.
What was interesting, actually, is Auschwitz came out with a statement. They say, memory of victims of Auschwitz has at times been violated and instrumentalized in various statements. David appears to wish to use a symbol of the largest cemetery in the world as some sort of sick, hateful, pseudo-artistic symbolic expression, calling for acts that seem to transgress any civil, wartime, moral, or human laws that may sound as a call for murder of the scale akin to Auschwitz, puts the whole honest world face to face with a madness that must be confronted and firmly rejected. We do hope Israeli authorities will react to such a shameful abuse, as terrorism can never be a response to terrorism. I thought that was pretty significant to come from the Auschwitz Memorial itself, who they do not let, I also want to make it clear, they basically just protect the legacy of Auschwitz. They are not political in any way. They only come out when people either mistakenly refer to Auschwitz or use it in this context
or
to
say
protect,
they want something else to be turned into
protect the memory of the people who all died there. And if you ever get the chance, I highly recommend that people go and visit, or any of the concentration camp sites in Poland, in order to get a view, to see it for yourself, and also to understand where they are coming from too. And I really do respect them for coming out and seeing something like that.
The last one, Saagar, I thought you would enjoy in particular, because this is the girl boss Israeli minister. This is the woman who is the Israeli minister for the advancement of the status of women. So a little bit of identity politics being played here by the Netanyahu government. Let's see what this enlightened liberal feminist has to say about what she wants to see in Gaza.
I don't care about Gaza. I literally don't care. For all I care, they can go out and swim in the sea. I want to see dead bodies of terrorists.
So there you go.
Right.
There you go. The last thing I'll say on this, Saagar, of why I think these things are important too, is because there is a long, multi-decade attempt to paint Palestinians as the sole obstacle to peace. There is no doubt that extremists on the Palestinian side have blocked, for example, the Oslo Accords, have been opposed to it, have sought to undermine it. But when you hear these comments, and when you read the Likud party charter, which talks about from the river to the sea, when you see Netanyahu out bragging about thwarting a Palestinian state and saying, hey, you got to stick with me if you want to block a Palestinian state forever, this provides some context of the type of viewpoints and analysis that are not just present, but quite dominant in his political coalition, which is governing the state of Israel right now. And if you're not dealing with that, if you're not reckoning with that, then you're just living in a complete fantasy land. And the results you're going to get are going to match the total disconnect from reality that you're working with.
Yeah, this is another issue I have too with a lot of older politicians and even people who don't understand the country, is they use, Biden in particular, lives in like a Golda Meir Israel. It's like, bro, that's 50 years away. And look, America's changed a lot in 50 years, but not even close to as much as the amount of demographic change that they have had versus what we've had actually makes our immigration problems look very different, just in terms of their makeup, their politics, where things have gone. And I think that's actually one of the bigger problems that we face in this, is that people who may have gone in the 90s or in the 80s, I'll tell you what, I see this a lot with India. For example, a lot of people who immigrated to the United States from India in the 80s have this idea of India as like this, led by the Nehrus and the Congress Party.
Yeah.
And then they go back and they're like, what the hell is going on here? I'm like, yeah, the country changed a lot ever since you left. It turns out that when there's a new party in town, the entire civic understanding of the country change in a single generation.
Yeah.
That doesn't really happen here, but it does happen in the rest of the world all the time. And so you have to update your understanding of that. And that's something that a lot of politicians refuse to do. Even though we're living in 2023 and you can go watch it all for yourself on YouTube.
If you care to.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's the other thing is this whole freak out about like, oh my God, the kids on TikTok, like their views are so different. It's like, yeah, because these videos are getting views on TikTok.
Well, and they have no individual understanding of the time period I'm talking about. Because I'm even just on the cusp of like, I remember the Ehud Baraks and all those other people who were in charge, but the vast majority of my life has been spent under this type. And I can vaguely remember some of it. I mean, if you're 10 years younger than me, you can't remember any of that. It doesn't even exist.
That's very true. That's a very good point. Hey guys, if you like that video, go to breakingpoints.com, become a premium subscriber and help us build the best independent media organization on the planet.
That's right. We're subscriber funded. We're building something new. We want to replace these failing mainstream media organizations.
So again, to subscribe, it's breakingpoints.com.